Hello and welcome back to the Second Take Podcast. My name is Calvin Williams. I'm here with my co-host, Marco Rogers. Today, we have a nice episode lined up for you. We're going to be recapping college football. We're going to have a little bit of a new segment. We're going to do some power rankings, the Second Take Podcast's very own. Then we'll move on to a recap of Week 5 in the NFL, and then everyone's favorite segments, NFL predictions and college predictions, and we'll finish it off with our underdog and breakout player predictions. Should be a good one today, so let's get into it. We're going to start off with Michigan barely having a really tough first half, 10-10 at the end of the first half, but they were able to pull away 21 unanswered in the second. So, Marco, anything to say about this one?
Yeah, J.J. McCarthy, solid performance. The only thing he did wrong was that pick wasn't the best decision. It was pretty locked up. And on a couple of throws where he still got it to the receiver, but he could have led the receiver better. Like a couple ones to A.J. Henning early on, one to Ronnie Bell. Or he still got it there, but it wasn't as accurate as I would like. Overall, solid performance. Quorum had a couple of big runs, but other than that, Indiana very committed to stopping the run. And in the first half, this was a very close game. I thought Michigan had a decent chance of losing, but defense allowed a total of 2 yards in the second half with all the sacks, and just great pass rush performance, a couple of big runs, good performance by JJ overall, and a solid win in a trap game.
Yeah, definitely. Indiana's always a tough game. Excuse me. Indiana's always a tough game for Michigan. So it's a close game. Even though Indiana's not a great team, it's always going to be close, especially when you're at the Hoosier Stadium. And like you said earlier, I was very impressed with the pass rush from Iabioki and Mike Morris. So hopefully they can continue that for the rest of the season. All right, moving on. Ohio State destroying MSU. No surprise here. Ohio State is looking like the best team in the country, especially the way Georgia and Alabama have been having so many close games lately. Personally, I think Ohio State is currently the favorite for the national championship. What do you have to say about that one, Marco?
Jackson Smith and Jigba has played one game this year, and they're still the best offense in college football. CJ Stroud, Heisman, his only pick was a pick six, which made it close early, but this offense is just so dominant. Once they get Jackson Smith and Jigba back, I don't think any defense will really be able to hold them to under 40 points.
Yeah, if Michigan wants to get that win later in the season, they're going to need the offense to step up big time. All right, next up, Kentucky gets upset at home versus South Carolina. This was my upset pick. And, I told you, Kentucky coming off a loss. They hadn't dealt with that yet this season, and they weren't able to recover. South Carolina played a great game, and they were able to get it done here. What do you think about this one, Marco?
Yeah, obviously Kentucky backup QB in, lots of injuries around, but you still should be winning this game against a bad South Carolina team. Spencer Rattler wasn't even very good. Just lots of runs. Great game from Marshawn Lloyd, the South Carolina running back, really held the time of possession for them, and they just won this game with defense and offense when necessary.
Yeah, like you said, Kentucky without starting quarterback still should be a win, but when your starting quarterback has a 29 QBR, it's not usually a recipe for success. All right, moving on, we have Alabama surviving at Texas A&M. This was a game that Texas A&M very easily could have won. Goal line, last play of the game. They just couldn't get it in the end zone. So Alabama definitely showing a lot of weakness without Bryce Young. And it's going to be interesting to see, first of all, when Bryce Young comes back. Second, what Jalen Milroe is going to be able to do to turn this Alabama team around when he's at quarterback.
Yeah, the thing about this game is, Bama had 4 turnovers, 3 fumbles. That just isn't going to happen again. Bama's a good team. That's somewhat of a fluke to have 3 fumbles in a game. Obviously, Milroe is a young QB, so you understand him fumbling 3 times. But that's just not going to happen again. And you take away those 3 fumbles, and I think Bama wins this game by a few scores. They played better than Texas A&M for the most part. Texas A&M had a few jump ball catches that were just also kind of flukes, where the receiver just made great plays, I guess. Bama did a great job of stopping Devon A-Chain, one of the best running backs in college football. Milrow, they weren't having him do as much as I would have liked. Jahmyr Gibbs played great, 154 rushing yards, but yes, Bama did not look great. But I think if they had Bryce Young in this game, they win it by 3 to 4 scores.
Definitely. And, there was a lot of flukes, like that one jump ball at the end of the game where it was like the smallest window ever and the receiver jumped up, caught it over two Alabama defenders. Obviously, like you said, that's not going to happen very often. But we knew coming into this game without Bryce Young, it would be a close game. It was. Not much more to be said. All right, moving on. Number 17, TCU ends Kansas's number 19's Kansas run. Kansas's first loss of the season. This was a close one. It just sucks that Kansas lost due to their star quarterback, Heisman contender Jalen Daniels, being hurt early, and they just weren't able to pull this one out. Marco?
Yeah, I mean, Jason Bean, the Kansas backup, looked better at throwing the football than Jalen Daniels usually does, but he just doesn't have that run threat that Daniels does, forcing them to just be more one-dimensional. I mean, they still put up a lot of points, but the late touchdown at the end really hurts. I mean, 1 minute 36 left. What a great catch by Quentin Johnston. He had 206 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. You just can't let that happen if you're Kansas. And TCU looks like a very good team this year. They could be playoff dark horses.
Definitely, TCU is looking very dangerous for sure. Because this is not a bad Kansas team by any means. All right. Last college football recap game. Number 11 Utah loses at number 18 UCLA, and this game was close. I will say that this game was close up until basically a couple minutes into the fourth quarter. UCLA got a touchdown, and then they got, I believe it was a pick six, and that basically sealed this one. It was a very well played game by UCLA. Dorian Thompson-Robinson playing really well again. Only completed 18 for 23 passes, but he threw for almost 300 yards. He had 4 touchdowns, only threw 1 pick. He is definitely looking like he's getting in full stride, which is what you want to see as they face harder opponents like USC later in the season. And then Zach Charbonnet, he ran for almost 200 yards. He's one of the best running backs in college football, in my opinion. And this UCLA team's looking dangerous moving in towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, winner of UCLA USC could very easily end up being in the college football playoff. Zach Charbonnet looks great, almost 200 rushing yards, a touchdown on just 22 carries, which is not that much. Dorian Thompson-Robinson looks like he could be a Heisman dark horse. Utah is a very, very solid team. Obviously, an early loss to Florida, but besides that, they've blown out a lot of decent teams. And I think Utah could get revenge next week against USC at home, but just great win for UCLA. They look like a very, very good team.
Yeah, for sure. And if UCLA and USC, if that game leads to one of them being in the college football playoff, we could potentially see just not both Alabama and Georgia being in the college football playoff, and maybe just one, which would be definitely a big change in the college football scene. All right, moving on, our power rankings. We're just sort of going to highlight the ones that we want to talk about more, and then we'll breeze through the ones that are kind of unimportant. So first off, number 1, Ohio State. Ohio State is definitely the best offense in college football as of yet, and without star wide receiver like Marco was saying earlier, Jackson Smith and Jigba, they're looking like just very great team all around, and I don't see how anyone else could be number 1 right now. Marco?
Oh yeah, Ohio State looks dominant. Their defense with Jim Knowles looks very solid. They can hold teams to under 20 points. They can score over 40 points. They're just blowing out a lot of teams. I mean, they haven't really played anyone good yet, but they're still so far clearly the best team in college football. 2 Bama, 3 Georgia. Can't really argue about that. When Bryce Young's healthy, maybe they could challenge Ohio State, Bama, but that's close. At 4, we have Michigan. I mean, obviously, we haven't looked great, but we've played some decent opponents like Maryland. At Iowa's tough. At Indiana's tough in the trap game. But next week is when we really find out about the team against Penn State. And I'm just excited for that game. How about you, Cal?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a good test for Michigan, especially moving later into the season. I mean, Michigan State's going to be tough after Penn State just because it's a rivalry. And then obviously we have a few easier games, and then we have to take on Ohio State away in the Horseshoe. So that's going to be a tough one for sure. But if Michigan can prove themselves this week against Penn State, I think they're a sure number 4 right now. All right, next up we have number 5, Tennessee. They're taking on Alabama this coming week. We'll talk about that game later. And to be honest, they're looking like one of the best teams in college football also. That's why we have them at number 5 here. Hendon Hooker leading the way for their team. Marco, what do you have to say about this one?
Yeah, coming off a blowout win at LSU, which is always tough. LSU was being dubbed. Tennessee's still like the better team. Hendon Hooker looks like a Heisman player. Their entire offense just looks incredible. And their defense is pretty bad. But I feel like their front 7 is solid defensively, but their secondary really needs work, and they'll get tested next week against Bama.
Yeah, for sure, especially with those big play receivers that Bama always have. Next up, USC at 6, Clemson at 7, Oklahoma State at 8, Penn State at 9, UCLA at 10, Ole Miss at 11, Oregon at 12. And 13, we have TCU, which is definitely a statement for sure because TCU barely coming off that win against Kansas last week. They have looked solid, but moving into the season, if they can keep an undefeated record, they're going to be another one of those teams. When we have like 7 teams that could make a push for the playoff right now. So definitely towards the end of the season, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm sure a couple of the teams will lose, take them out of contention, but it's going to be messy when it gets later into the season. We can't decide who's going to make the playoff. Marco?
Yeah, well, one thing I want to talk about, TCU Oklahoma State this week. Loser of that game probably is out of playoff contention. Winner of that game, they're true playoff contenders. And if winner of that game goes undefeated, they're making the playoffs, win the Big 12 championship with an undefeated record. We'll talk more about that incredible game later. But yeah, TCU, solid season.
Yeah, definitely. And then we have Mississippi State at Mississippi State at 14, Kansas State at 15, and then for 16 through 20, we're going to talk a little about all of these. So at 16, we have Texas. Earlier in the season, they had a great game against Alabama, and they've kind of disappeared since then, to be honest. But I could definitely see them ruining some teams' seasons in the SEC. Marco, do you have anything to say about Texas?
Yeah, you could argue if Quinn Ewers never got injured, this is an undefeated team with a win against Bama. And, I mean, they only lost by 1. Quinn Ewers looked great in that game. They probably would have won that game, probably would have beaten Texas Tech with Quinn Ewers. And, I mean, coming off a blowout against a bad Oklahoma team, but still rivalry game, this offense looks electric. The defense looks better than past years. Texas looks good this year.
Yeah, definitely. And this week they moved back into the rankings. They're at 23 now. Next up, we have number 17, Coastal Carolina. In the AP, they're receiving 61 votes, about 28th ranking. We got them higher. They're an undefeated team. They're definitely showing some promise, and it's looking like Coastal Carolina versus James Madison is going to be a top 25 game to finish off the season. And Coastal, the best team in the country, is definitely underrated right now. Marco?
Yeah, I mean, Grayson McCall looks like possibly a number 1 overall draft pick, obviously. Coastal, though, I mean, honestly, they look like a top 20 team. They aren't blowing teams out, but they're winning pretty comfortably. Teams have been coming back a little late, but they're up by at least 10 almost every game at half. They're not playing against bad teams, not good teams, but not bad. And they look like the best team in their conference. We'll see when they play James Madison. That'll decide the Sun Belt. They actually might end up having back-to-back games against James Madison due to their Sun Belt championship. But yeah, Coastal's looked great this year. I would not be shocked if they go undefeated. They can make a high New Year's Six bowl.
Definitely. And then at number 18, we have Kansas. Obviously, took a loss last week, TCU, as we said earlier. But that doesn't change the fact that with Jalen Daniels, that team probably would have won that game. He's just one of the best quarterbacks in the country, no doubt about it. So if this team can get him back, it's going to be huge for them. Marco?
Yeah, Kansas still going to be a good team. They'll still have a test next week at Oklahoma. Not a great Oklahoma team. Still on the road, Big 12, going to be tough. Next up, we have James Madison. Undefeated. Coming to FBS this year, they're ineligible for the playoffs. Obviously, they probably wouldn't make the playoffs, but they couldn't anyways. And James Madison, they look like a great team. Them versus Coastal also looks like a great matchup. That's going to be a very interesting game.
Yeah, for sure. And then to finish it off, we have Syracuse. Definitely, like out of nowhere, Syracuse has came onto the scene. Before this year, all they were was a basketball school. But they've just made a run this year. They're an undefeated team, and if they can keep making noise, it's going to be interesting to see where they end up when the bowl games come along. All right. Next up, we have our NFL recap. We're going to hurry through this. Patriots obliterate the Lions. I mean, Marco's happy about this, but this was a tough game for us Lions fans. Marco?
Yeah, Bailey Zapp, he zapped the Lions. He looked very solid. The receiving core looked good. The defense looks like one of the better defenses in the NFL. It is the Lions, though, so I'm not going to overreact. The Lions are always terrible.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised that the Patriots put up points on us, but the main issue I had is this was the number one scoring offense in the NFL coming into this game, and now they lose by a ton and they don't score a single point. So definitely rough. Moving on, Cowboys beating the Rams. To be honest, the Cowboys have had a great season. Don't get me wrong, they've looked good this season, but the Rams, it's like, I don't know if they're just getting older, and last year it was sort of their all-out year, but they're not looking too good this year. Marco?
Yeah, the offense is so stagnant. They rely off big plays. They had a couple of big plays. Tutu Atwell had a big one. Cooper Kupp. Obviously always going to be. He's the only consistent part about this offense. The O-line terrible. Stafford, even when he has time, looks bad. They have no run game whatsoever. This is not a very good football team, and I would not be shocked due to the division they're in if they do not make the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a surprise at all because, like you said, terrible offense. The only thing they've really had is Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp, and since every team knows that's coming, it's just there's nothing really they can do to move the ball. All right, next up, Eagles staying undefeated with a close win over the Cardinals. We knew this one would be close. Cardinals came into this game 2-2, but just like the Ravens, they were a very good 2-2 team. But the Eagles were able to get it done. Definitely still looking like, in my mind, the best team in the NFL. Marco?
Yeah, Hurts' ability to run and pass is just so incredible. Cardinals look like a good team. I think they'll make the playoffs, but they're 0-3 at home. Their stadium tends to not be a very big advantage. And I think they'll be a good team this year, probably 11-6, 10-7, but they really got to start picking up the pace.
Yeah, for sure. Excuse me. All right. And then to finish off our NFL recap, Giants taking down the Packers in London. Brian Dable is looking like the coach of the year right now. He has turned this Giants team around, despite them obviously not having the best record. Despite them not having the best schedule, like they're playing some not great teams, they've still been able to win a lot of games. They're 4-1 right now. Saquon Barkley, he hasn't gotten hurt yet, knock on wood. And they're looking like a good team. So it's definitely good for New York to have a good team for the first time in a while. And it's going to be definitely interesting to see if they can make a playoff run this year.
Yeah, Saquon looks like one of the best running backs in the NFL when healthy. Daniel Jones is not making mistakes. defense looks very solid. And Aaron Rodgers has no receivers, so big win for the Giants. They'll have another big test next week, which we'll talk about.
Yep. All right. Moving on to our NFL predictions, we have Ravens at the Giants. We just talked about the Giants. This is going to be a good one. Ravens, probably the best 3-2 team we've seen in a while. I mean, they've trailed for like 2% of the game so far this year, and they've still managed to have 2 losses. So that definitely hurts. But they've played good teams. They have a tough schedule. If they can take down the Giants, they're definitely going to solidify as one of the better teams in the NFL, and I think they're going to do that today. Lamar Jackson is just too good, and although I like the Giants as a team, I think that Lamar Jackson is having another borderline MVP season this year.
Yeah, I think Lamar's too good for this defense. I mean, Giants don't really have great receivers. Richie James is their leading receiver. He's not very good. They're going to have to be too reliant on Saquon. I think Ravens are going to commit to stopping the run. I got Ravens, and I think Giants might be a tad bit overrated.
All right, you want to take the Patriots game, Marco?
Yeah, so Pats at Browns. Gonna be a tough game. Jacoby Brissett has not looked bad. This is one of the better 2 and 3 teams in the NFL. Dominant run game, but Pats are very good at stopping the run. I believe it'll be Bailey Zappi at QB, and if it is, I feel like Pats are gonna win this game. I mean, he's looked better than Mac Jones, less mistakes when he has to. He's making lots of throws that Mac Jones makes. Mac Jones had 2 touchdowns to 5 picks in like 3 games, which is terrible. And I think Pats, they have a great run game with Ramondre Stevenson. I think our receiving corps has looked good. And Cleveland with Jacoby Brissett, they're not that good of a team. I got Pats by a field goal.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. All right, next up, our final NFL prediction, the Bills at the Chiefs. Definitely a marquee matchup here. 2 powerhouses in the NFL. The Chiefs, despite losing Tyreek Hill, have been very good. Kelsey has sort of just been dominating every team he's played in the red zone and out. And Mahomes has been able to get it to him. So this Chiefs team is very solid. But on the other hand, this Bills team has 1 loss. So do the Chiefs. But the Bills have looked like the best team in the NFL. Despite that 1 loss they had, this Bills team has came out every game. Their defense looks phenomenal. Josh Allen is borderline the best quarterback in the NFL. He's been getting the ball to Stephon Diggs. They've been making plays. I got the Bills in this one.
Yeah, obviously a rematch of last year's AFC divisional round, which was one of the best playoff games I've ever seen. Obviously, Chiefs go down late. They need 13 seconds to get in field goal range. They get there. Josh Allen never touches the ball again due to overtime. And just tough loss for the Bills. I think they get vengeance here. I got Bills by 10.
Yeah, definitely going to be a good one. I will certainly be watching that one. All right, now moving on to our college football prediction. We're going to start off with our Penn State at Michigan game. With, as customary on the Second Take podcast, we're not going to make any predictions for this one, just because it's a close game. It's a good game, and it's Michigan, so we don't like to do any jinxing around here. But as for a summary of what this game is going to look like, this Penn State defense, we've talked about it before, we're going to talk about it again, is one of the best in all of college football, as we've seen. And this game is going to be a low-scoring battle, no doubt. If it's the key to this game is going to be scoring. I mean, both teams have very solid defenses. It's just going to be whatever team can make a big play. That's going to be the team that wins. So, Marco?
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to, first of all, turnovers, and second of all, what team has better skill position players to make big plays. Penn State has 2 great running backs, including Nick Singleton, one of the best freshmen in the country. But Penn State's receiver corps is solid, led by Parker Washington. Very similar play to Ronnie Bell. I'm not sure if Penn State has the same depth at receiver, but they're still a very good team. They obviously have Joey Porter Jr., one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. I mean, in college football, he'll be a first-round draft pick, and it's going to come down to what team turns the ball over less and what team runs the ball better, and whoever does that better wins this game.
Yeah, definitely. All right, moving on. We have number 3 Alabama at number 6 Tennessee. I'll talk about this one later, but because I have an interesting pick for this one, but this one's going to come down to how well Jalen Milroe plays. I mean, Bryce Young, I believe he's still out for this one. Alabama is outmatched in the quarterback department here because Tennessee, Hendon Hooker is looking phenomenal this year, and Jalen Milroe had a really rough week last week. If he can settle in this week, it'll be good for Bama, obviously, but I think Tennessee has a little bit of an edge here. What do you think, Marco?
Yeah, I mean, Bryce Young's questionable. People say he's leaning towards playing. If Bryce Young plays, Bama's going to win this game. Tennessee's defense is nowhere close enough to stopping a fully healthy Bama. Bama's defense is also one of the best in college football. They're allowing 12.5 points a game, and they played several solid offenses. I think Bama's going to win this game. I think they're the better team. If Jalen Milroe is playing, it's going to be very, very close. Probably Tennessee's going to win. But if Bryce Young is playing, I got Bama by 10.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think we might know who wins that game by the pregame based on which quarterback is starting. All right, we're going to breeze through these last couple because they're good games, but not as good. Still top 25 matchups, though. Next up, so we have NC State at Syracuse. This is going to be a good one. NC State, as Marco has said so many times, is one of the most overrated teams in all of college football. Marco, what do you have to say about this one?
Yeah, I mean, NC State, I mean, they have a pretty good defense, very solid defense, actually, with Sean Tucker, one of the best running backs in college football. Garrett Schrader, very solid quarterback, does not turn the ball over. I think Syracuse wins this game. Devin Leary throws a couple of picks. Garrett Schrader does not. They run the ball well at home. I got Syracuse with their great defense to win this game.
Yep, that'll be a good one for sure. Moving on, we have number 16, Mississippi State at number 22, Kentucky. Kentucky's just on a cold streak right now. I'm not sure if they can recover. Losing to Ole Miss, then losing to South Carolina last week. And this Mississippi State team has looked very solid. I think Mississippi State's won this one, Marco.
Well, it comes down to is Will Levis playing or not. Obviously, injured last week in South Carolina. That's why they lost. They're I think they're a top 15 team with Will Levis playing. They would have beaten South Carolina, and I think Will Rogers though is possibly a Heisman contender, as I've said a couple of times. 22 touchdowns with 3 interceptions, over 2,000 yards passing. This offense is so electric for Mississippi State, but if Will Levis is playing, it's going to be a toss-up game. If not, I got Mississippi State pretty comfortably.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next up we have USC at Utah. This is going to be a good one for sure. Caleb Williams has had a phenomenal season as of yet, throwing for over 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns. But don't get me wrong, Cameron Rising has also had a great season, throwing for almost 1,500 yards himself and 13 touchdowns. This will be a battle of the quarterbacks, but the way Utah looked last week against UCLA, who's a very good team, I think USC is going to take care of this one and set up that matchup for UCLA.
Yeah, the thing is, though, USC is like either pulling away late or winning the game by like a touchdown or two late. Like they're winning these games in the fourth quarter. Utah's been in the games they've won against the same teams like Oregon State. They beat Oregon State at halftime. USC was up 3 at halftime against Oregon State. Like this is that you could say they're a second half team. Or maybe this team is just like not that good yet, not fully developed in terms of chemistry due to all the transfers. Obviously, the big three, Caleb Williams, Travis Dye, and Jordan Addison is going to be tough. But this is the best offense USC has played and the best defense they've played. I got Utah here by 7.
Yeah, it'll be a good one for sure. And our last college football prediction will be number 8, Oklahoma State at number 13, TCU. This would be a good one for sure. Spencer Sanders leading that Oklahoma State team. this is definitely going to be interesting. I mean, TCU has Kendre Miller in their backfield, who's had a great season so far. He's been dominating a lot of teams, but this Oklahoma State team has been able to put up a lot of points in a lot of their games, which is the reason they've been able to win a classic Big 12 team. They're going to put up a lot of points, but it's going to be interesting to see if they can get the number of stops that they need to pull this one away. Marco?
Yeah, I mean, these are two extremely similar teams. They've played both decent opponents, no one great. They both averaged 46.4 points a game. Oklahoma State's average allowing 25 points a game. TCU's average allowing 24 points a game. Very similar teams. They pass the ball similarly. TCU does run the ball a little better, and Oklahoma State's defense is worse than TCU's defense. Obviously, losing their defensive coordinator last year to Ohio State. I got TCU here, and they pull away as the Big 12 favorites.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting. And like you said, losing that defensive coordinator really hurts because they were looking like one of the best defenses in college football last year, and it was their defense carrying them, whereas this year it's been the offense all the way. Moving on, our underdog predictions. I'm going to start it off because we've already talked about this game a little bit. I'm going to say Tennessee. Oh, by the way, my underdog prediction was correct last week, so we are currently tied at 2-4 each. So my underdog prediction is Tennessee beating Alabama. I know we don't usually allow something like this because it's not an unranked team being a top 20 team, but since it's Bama and they don't usually lose, me and Marco both agreed it was okay if I chose this. So I'm taking this one because it's going to come down to if Bryce Young plays or not. And that's basically a 50-50 shot, and I'm good with that. So I think if Bryce Young doesn't play, this is going to be a win for the Tennessee Volunteers. Marco?
Yeah, definitely going to be an interesting game. I think if Bryce Young doesn't play, I agree with Tennessee. But if he does, that game's just not going to be very close. My underdog prediction, number four Clemson, night game at Florida State. Nobody wants to play a night game at Florida State. Florida State is coming off a couple of really close losses against Wake Forest and NC State, two solid teams. And Clemson has not played anyone really this year. Obviously, they did beat Wake Forest and NC State, but they played them about as well as Florida State did. Florida State just couldn't finish late while Clemson could. And a night game at Florida State, it's not going to be a fun time for a playoff hopeful team, especially when Florida State is solid, led by Jordan Travis, solid run game with Trayshawn Ward. This is a good Florida State team. They match Clemson with talent, and this is going to be the best defense Clemson has played yet. This is a very solid defense. It's going to come down to can Jordan Travis pass the ball well, and can they run the ball well on Clemson's incredible front seven? I think they can. I got Florida State here in a close one.
Wouldn't that be nice, knocking a Clemson team out of the college football race? All right, to finish it off, we're going to do our breakout players. My breakout player is Sean Tucker, the Syracuse running back. He's had a great season so far. Over 500 rushing yards, a couple of touchdowns to his name. And this week, NC State defense is going to have some trouble this week, and that's one of the reasons I think Syracuse is going to win. Sean Tucker's going to just run all over them. This is going to be a win for Syracuse, and Sean Tucker's going to have a big game. Marco?
Yeah, Sean Tucker, definitely one of the better running backs in college football. My breakout player is Drake May. He's already broken out. He's been a Heisman contender all year. He's been single-handedly carrying UNC to having a decent team at least. I believe 4-1 or 5-1. They're playing Duke. Obviously, this is a rivalry, but it's going to be a dominant rivalry. I mean, it is at Duke. It is a night game. Duke is not as bad as previous years. North Carolina is dominant, though. I think Drake May passes for over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, runs for over 70 yards. I think he dominates this game. UNC puts up over 45 points.
Yeah, that UNC offense has been powerful all year, and I don't see why they won't be again this coming week. All right, Marco, do you have anything else?
Nope.
All right, thank you all for listening to the Second Take podcast. We will see you next Wednesday. Peace.
Yep, bye.